Good morning and most welcome to 1513 of the Heidegger series. We'll today continue where I left off at 1512. 7 Life Lessons of Chaos by John Briggs and F. David Peat. And we are currently at page 16. In the example of the water in the pan, at the bifurcation point, cellular vortices form with hot liquid rising through their centers and colder liquid descending along the outside. A large negative feedback loop. As one vortex butts up against another, stable hexagonal flowing cell walls are created between the descending cascades of falling cooler water. This self-organized system of heated water creates its structure by giving up some sense of the degrees of freedom it would have had if it boiled. Think of it as an orchestra whose members decide that they rather play in concert. They tune their different instrument to concert A, and all play in the same key at the same tempo. The result is harmony, order, and a clearly defined musical structure. In a symphony, when each movement comes to an end, the music reorganizes in a new way with different degrees of freedom being exploited to involve a new key and a new tempo. Systems that self-organize out of chaos survive only by staying open to a constant flow through of energy and material. Vortices in rivers and streams typically emerge out of the swirls of turbulence produced downstream from obstructions in a fast, deep current. Each vortex has a definite shape, but it is in reality composed of material flowing through it. In a similar way, We ourselves are composed of material constantly flowing through us. Our shape is created and sustained by the flux of which we are part. We are what we eat, what we breathe, what we experience from our environment. Many of the structures that we see in nature are examples of self-organized chaos. The cupped hexagonal patterns on the surface of sand dunes, snow fields, and cloud layers result from chaotically organized vortices of warm air rising into the atmosphere, similar to the pan of water. These vortices remain stable as long as the conditions set out out of which they are created are kept within certain limits. Watch a flock of birds taking off from the trees, and you'll see another type of self-organization in action. The birds jockey frantically, trying to get free of the maelstrom of their fellows and up into the air, wanting to be part of the group, yet at the same time trying to avoid collisions with each other. Computer models show that each individual's attempt to keep minimum and maximum distances from others causes flight paths to couple into feedback loops of attraction and repulsion. Positive and negative feedback balance so that the individual birds appear transformed into a single organism. In a similar way, a flock of sandpipers on a beach can turn as a unit faster than individual reaction times would allow. Random, highly energetic gases in interstellar space self-organize into galaxies and star system. During the Earth's geological history, self-organization occurred as water ran across the great erosion channels left by melting glaciers. For one reason or another, some paths of water became amplified, more deeply grooved, and linked into one another, eventually forming the vast dendritic patterns of the relatively stable river systems draining the continents. Here is an example of a stable chaotic system. And you can see how the stability comes from the outside, the externality. A friend of mine called it the vision of the soul. Perpetual, eternal, and anti-fragile. Some scientists believe the complex DNA molecule, which contains rules that help guide our unfolding bodies, rules that are themselves subject to the bubbling transformations of chaos, emerged out of a chemical flux in the early days of the earth, much as the cellular vortices emerge in the pan of water. So it turns out that chaos is nature's creativity. Our bodies are pervaded by chaotic, open systems that allow a constantly creative response to a changing environment. For example, our brain self-organizes by changing its subtle connectivity with every act of perception. The list of ways that nature puts the principle of self-organized chaos to use is virtually endless. People who regularly engage in creative activities usually resonate immediately with the description of how chaos emerges into form. Recognizing that they also collaborate with chaos. Looking at the way professional creators work with chaos gives us a well-documented glimpse into a process that is actually available to each of us. Because the simple truth is that we are all creative. chaos and creativity. Next truth. Truth and the connection of the individual to the indivisible. For the human animal, creativity is about getting beyond what we know, getting to the truth of things. That's where chaos comes in. We're all necessarily conditioned by society. Our conditioning lays out with apparent certainty a seemingly complete picture or map of what reality is and how we are supposed to act in it. We are trained to accept and move about in this reality from the moment we emerged from the womb. Our habits of thought, opinions and experiences, and even the facts of the world are similar to negative feedback loops that go round and round to keep us in essentially the same familiar place. And I think you can see here now how also the Klein bottle is participating with a positive feedback loop. And that space in itself is, even if it's static, a constant movement to cause the stability of existence. Such loops of limiting negative feedback are obviously needed to keep society stable, but they can also be horribly confining if we come to believe that that's all there is to our lives.
Alltså kaffe, där står det kaffe. Och så står det starkt kaffe på den under.
The danger we all share is of becoming like Pavlov's dogs, our glands reacting every time the bell rings. And society is full of bells. Often enough, habits of mind, the supposed certainties of our knowledge about the world, produce distortions and deceptions about reality. More important, the opinions and facts that constitute our conditioning may end up obscuring a deeper authenticity and truth about our individual experience of being in the world. So you see here, to get to existence, we must accept that is outside of us. We must be like the vortex in the stream to be consistent, taking in things and being with externality in precision and skill. What do we mean by truth? In a culture of postmodern relativism, the word truth has become overloaded with unfortunate associations. It's difficult to use in any authentic way. Many people today understandably avoid it because those in the past who have claimed to possess truth tended to impose it on others, often by violent means. With all the diversity of our modern world, how are we to choose between the truths offered by various religions and cultures? But truth, in the way we mean it here, cannot be possessed and imposed on others. One of the early meanings associated with the idea of the true came in the context of the craft person who makes a thing straight and balanced. Similarly, a person's life can be true in a sense of moving in a straight way, being undistorted, and responding authentically to the present. Here, the word truth does not mean something absolute. This truth is the truth. Or relative. You have your truth, I have mine. Enter postmodernism. Truth is instead something lived in the moment and expressive of an individual's connection to the whole. Novelist Joseph Conrad wrote of truth as the latent feeling of fellowship with all creation. The subtle but invincible conviction of solidarity that knits together the loneliness of innumerable hearts. Conrad believed truth can be found in every place, in every moment, in small things as well as in grand things. But we're so caught up with looking at the world through our conditioned ideas, opinions, and emotions about its truth that we often don't see right in front of us the sort of truth to which Conrad is referring.
Såg ni då? Eller? Oj då, vad skönt va? Nej, eller
novelet grasping the truth of the moment was central to the French painter Paul Cézanne. He strove to record on canvas the exact sensations arising in him as he sat in front of his subject. His aim was not to paint his idea or conditioned opinion of a landscape or a table of fruit, but the exact truth of his moment by moment perception as they connected him to the life in front of him. He would make small movements of his head as he painted, each new glance acting to shift the entire scene and calling into question what he had previously seen and painted. His paintings are therefore a series of bifurcation points of vision, constituting what has been called Cézanne's doubt. Cézanne believed that in the fluctuations of these little sensations, as he called them, lay the truth of his perception. He encouraged us to come into contact with the movement of truth that lies in constantly questioning what we see and think about the world. Truth and chaos are linked. To live with a creative doubt means to enter into chaos as to discover that the truth that cannot be measured by words. Making the vertex one, turbulence. The poet John Keats called the entry into chaos an immersion in doubts and uncertainties. Think of doubts and uncertainties as a way of extending whatever limited degrees of freedom we have come to accept from life. Artists, healers, and those undergoing life changes open up to the uncertainties, accessing degrees of freedom that can spur new self-organization. Going through the death of a loved one, a divorce, a period of self-doubt is painful. But often those are the very experiences that bring us to keen sense of the truth beyond words and a new path in life.
Hello.
We can here compare of the strive to contain something, to separate it, to make it an item, reify it, the atom, or the self, and seeing them as absolutely separate can lead to a tendency within ourselves to try to shut out what is beyond, the turbulence, as Peat and Briggs are referring to her. Thinking that that will actually strengthen us. This shows that exactly the opposite is happening when you are clinging to the existence. You will make everything weaker, more fragile, less permanent, since, as I mentioned briefly, with a flock of birds, even the stillness you can see from a flock of starlings. I have seen the biggest one, maybe 10,000 birds, and they move like one animal, although it is absolutely impossible for their neurons to react sufficiently quick to adapt to the neighboring birds and the whole flock as such. And in this flock you can see stillness at moments, and then at other movements you can see immense quick happenings like shudders or shutters, trembling and making the whole constellation different. I invite you to go to YouTube and see one of the biggest starling flocks in Europe, which is in Rome, center Rome. Somebody calculated it could be like 30,000 of them. And how they, especially at nightfall when the sun lights them, you see that there is permanence in this turbulent area. You see that it is not the death of things to have turbulence or non-existence. It is life. It is what makes permanency. And the same is true with the galaxies. We showed earlier on here how they form and become eternally stable thanks to chaos, thanks to molestations, distortions, everything that is not the existence of the thing. And this parallels what we've been talking about earlier, that we don't understand the subjective movement, and therefore we isolate either, creating absolute boundaries, impenetrable boundaries. On the one side, the object, on the other side, the subject, and they having no connection, no. So here you can see how stability, permanence, longevity, and health, I would say, which is very important. The closed, cramped posture of modern man is often like this, where we tense the back side of the back and also tense our stomachs, collapse and lose our sense of the sitting bones, is a way to protect ourselves, to avoid horror vacui or differences, to fix us, so to speak, in a certain mood. And we want to be in the same routines every day. And in this situation, we make everything weaker. I think the example, I was talking to the caretaker here, and he's been training Budo, karate, kendo for many years. And there is a strict routine as well as break up of the routine. And there is complications. Often we try to avoid the complicated things, to, so to speak, simplify them for protection. Instead, invite the complexities little by little. Learn how to conquer them. Learn that you can do them. And thereby you will grow stronger and stronger. And in the end, you will be immortal. Because this is the true voice of the soul. Maybe there is a, I took your book from you. I have a little question here by my colleague. Give him the microphone.
Let me go to page 21 in this great book. The mention of Cézanne. Cézanne has lately turned up with Rosen's paper, who analyzed Merleau-Ponty's analysis of Merleau-Ponty, and here we had, so I will repeat something from page 21. He, Cézanne, would make small movements of his head as he painted. Each new glance acting to shift into the scene and calling into question what he had previously seen and painted. His paintings are therefore a series of bifurcation points of vision constituting what has been called Cézanne's doubt. So I would compare this with Schrödinger's Deus factus sum, I have become a god. In that sense that we humans are creators and our observing creates reality. And here I don't know how, if I can visualize this, but perhaps you can ask Hans, we are here in a painting studio, how this would have worked in practice. So he, that is, would make small movements of his head as he painted. I don't know. So in some way it's difficult to visualize each glance acting to shift in that scene. It would be interesting to see. It's not that something that every painter does, but I suppose Cézanne's was something a little bit particular, something that made him stand out. So I give it back to you. Hans, if you want to add something.
Yes, when you mentioned that, Kalle, good one, very good, because if you remember the saccades, how the ice imperceptibly moves in all of us. My guess is that the saccades were visible in Cézanne. Saccades are the jumping of the ice, and it's a chaotic movement. We know that. It is what makes the world come to being. It's a movement, and it's very, very quick. So, for instance, which a painter paints, the saccades will zoom in, zoom out, so to speak, but that's not what they do. They create a pattern that is similar to a vortex, and that pattern is reality, not a thing in itself separated from us, but it's a communal dance where my saccades dance with the exteriority. And possibly you could in Cézanne see the saccades. Maybe they happen very, very slowly. So his glancing was what they call his doubting tendency, to check out, did he really see it? Or was it something else? But I do recommend check out saccades. They have really turned the vision, so to speak, in painting upside down in a positive direction. They are S-A.
No, could you show it into the camera perhaps?
I hope so.
With big letters.
I am not certain 100% of the spelling, but I give it a try.
I heard the name before, but now I cannot.
We had a lecture about them.
Yes.
I think it's this way. Not 100% certain, but I think this will do. If you make a search of it in Google, you can take away the H certainty. They're very interesting because they show that also vision and reality is saccades or chaotic, just like in the book. And I think could be the people we're going to meet in a week are not aware of this. And then this lingering existence of the outer world would still be, so to speak, embodied in them. Make understanding of these interesting things harder. Well, are there any more questions? Oh, thank you very much for your patience and have a very pleasant morning. Bye.
Thank you.